All right, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today, and happy Friday. You've joined the Advancement Grants webinar. I'm Takinia, the Senior Grants Program Manager for the Arts and Humanities Council, and I'm here with my wonderful staff, Ana Alicia, who is our coordinator, and Karen, who is also a manager. So here's the agenda for this webinar. I'm going to briefly discuss the role of the Arts and Humanities Council in the community. We'll go over the grants process, our FY21 guidelines for this funding opportunity. We'll discuss required application materials, the Fluid Review online portal, which will be covered by my colleague Ana Alicia, and we'll also offer some helpful grant writing tips. So please keep in mind that I will go through the whole presentation before I answer questions. If you have questions, please feel free to type in your questions. You should see a chat box at the bottom of your screen that allows you to type in a question. You can type in a question whenever you want. Just know that I won't be able to address that question until the end of the webinar when we've gone through all the slides. And also keep in mind that if for some reason we get a bunch of questions and I'm not able to answer all of them, you also have the opportunity to contact staff afterwards with any additional questions you may have. So the Arts and Humanities Council is the local cultural agency for Montgomery County. We receive public funds, that's taxpayer funds, from local government, and we regrant those funds to a diversity of arts and humanities organizations in the county, and we also provide funds for individual artists and scholars in the county. And our vision is also on this slide here. I'm not going to read the slide verbatim because you can find these statements in our guidelines and on our website. But we are happy to support all of the diversity, all of the rich cultural offerings within our beautifully diverse county. So the Arts and Humanities Council considers DEIA, which is also known as diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, to be of prime importance for our funding opportunities. So we have a statement here about equity and inclusion. You can also find this in our guidelines. We are committed to cultural equity and diversity for all of our funding opportunities, with a particular focus on communities that have been historically underserved. That includes Alana communities, Latinx, Asian, Arab, Native American, African. That also includes communities that are economically disadvantaged, differently abled individuals, LGBTQ+ communities, and also communities that have been geographically underserved in terms of geography. So that includes rural sections of the county that have been underserved. So there are various different ways that our applicants can serve communities that have been underinvested. And if you have any questions about how you can go about reaching communities that have been historically overlooked, feel free to contact us. But it is a core part of our grant making that we actually address equity and inclusion. And also of prime importance is ADA compliance, making sure that projects and funded activities are accessible to differently abled individuals. And please keep in mind that you can use our funding for ADA enhancements. So that means, for example, if you are applying for an advancement grant and you know that your facility needs ADA enhancements and you apply for a plan to make your facility ADA accessible, that's actually an allowable project type, and we'd be happy to fund those types of activities. If you go to our guidelines, you'll actually see a hyperlink within the ADA compliance paragraph that if you click on it, it'll lead you to a pretty extensive booklet that has various different suggestions for how organizations can make their activities accessible to differently abled individuals. So here's an overview of the grants process. We have the application deadline, which is coming up. Please keep in mind that the application deadline is Friday, February 21st at 11:59 p.m. Memorize that date, put it on your calendar, set a reminder, because we cannot accept late applications ever. So when this deadline passes, you will not be able to submit anything to us regarding your application. You have to get it in by the deadline. When we receive the application, staff will do an eligibility check. During this stage, we are not checking for competitiveness. We are checking to make sure that your project is in alignment with our guidelines. If we find that your project is not eligible, we will contact you and explain why the project is not eligible. But if you don't hear from us, in this stage, that's actually a good sign. It means that your project is eligible and that it will be moved forward to the panel. So if you don't hear from us for a few weeks, the next thing you'll hear is an announcement about the panel review date. The panel is a public panel. We highly encourage all applicants to attend the public panel because it's a wonderful learning opportunity. The panel will evaluate your project in direct alignment with the evaluative criteria that we have published in our guidelines. The panel is always a diverse mixture of professionals in the field, since, as I mentioned earlier, equity and inclusion is of prime importance to the Arts and Humanities Council. We make sure that we don't just talk the talk, we also walk the walk, which means that you will see ethnic and racial diversity within the panel. You'll see age diversity. I try my best to include gender diversity. We make sure that the panel has a diverse professional background, meaning that we make sure that there's a finance expert, a marketing expert, a community outreach expert, and all the panelists will have a diverse understanding of arts and humanities disciplines. We try to make sure that we recruit generalists. These are people who have been working in multiple disciplines. So that means that the panel will be able to cover all disciplines. That includes performing arts, visual arts, literary arts, and the humanities in its entirety. So when you attend the panel meeting, please remember that this is not a time to defend your proposal. This is a learning opportunity where you can sit quietly and listen and take notes. You're not allowed to record the panel meeting. You're not allowed to talk to panelists either before the meeting or after the meeting or during breaks. It's really just a time to be quiet and observe. When the panel is done, we forward their recommendations to our grants committee. Our grants committee reviews all panel comments and feedback. They weigh in with their assessment, and then the grants committee will report to our board. The board will also review the panel's assessment and the grants committee assessment, and the board has the final say on who is funded. So when the board makes their recommendations, then we announce awards to the field, and we also let applicants know if there are any declines. If you are not able to attend the panel, we strongly encourage you to set up a feedback appointment with staff so that you can review the panel's recommendations, but we cannot set up feedback appointments until after the board publicly announces awards. So you will have to wait for a little bit until you hear the public announcement in order to set up a feedback appointment. All right, so I'm going to quickly go over our guidelines. So a friendly reminder that the Arts and Humanities Council has been engaging in a overall funding opportunity revamp that's centered on DEIA, diversity, equity, and inclusion and access. And we went about this process by soliciting over 60 hours of feedback from the community, which included surveys. It included 8 listening sessions that we did over 2 years. Some of you may have attended those listening sessions to offer your feedback on our funding opportunities. And if you did, we sincerely appreciate your input. We also sent out a couple of surveys to the field and, analyzed the survey responses. And in addition to soliciting feedback from the community, the grants team researched over 42 grant makers all over the country to evaluate how they go about supporting their cultural sectors. And know that all of the changes that we made were not made in a vacuum. All the changes that we made are actually directly aligned with best practices in the grant making field, and also take into account helpful feedback from our community members. So the purpose of advancement grants is to assist organizations in maintaining fiscal stability and long-term viability. Grants can support long-term planning for capital improvement projects and or technological improvements that's critical to an organization's mission. We encourage the use of intentional strategies for achieving equity, diversity, inclusion, and access in the field. And just a friendly reminder that these awards are not for programming. So please do not apply for funding to present a play, for example. These are practical grants that are supposed to support your organization's infrastructure. So in terms of the scope of eligible projects that these grants can support, grants can support the optimization of existing technology. This is actually a change. So in previous years, grants could only support the purchase of new technology, but after talking to our grants committee and soliciting input from the field, we wanted to make sure that applicants also had the opportunity to enhance current technology. If you like the technology that you have, but you know it needs to be revamped, you can use our funding for current technology instead of buying new technology. But if you want to purchase new technology, that's still allowable as well. Another important change to consider is that we are now allowing a financial review in lieu of an audit, as long as you are not requesting over $50,000. So if you're requesting over $25,000 and up to $50,000, you'll have to submit a financial review, but you don't have to submit an audit. Now, you do have to submit an audit if you're requesting over $50,000. We also have revamped the staffing requirements. So if you are requesting over $25,000, we do require that you have a paid staff member working a minimum of 20 hours a week, because if you're requesting more money, we want to make sure that there's someone who can handle the admin component of managing the funds. And requests for $25,000 and under require a paid staff person employed at least 5 hours a week. So again, applicants must submit an audit if they apply for a grant that is over $50,000. And this is actually not a change. That's always been the case for this funding opportunity. And please keep in mind that if the audit or review expresses substantial doubt regarding an organization's ability to continue as a going concern, that organization may be deemed ineligible. Again, we would contact you if we have concerns about your audit, and if it contains a going concern, this would be a discussion that we have before it goes to panel. So in terms of grant award amounts, again, you must submit a financial review if you are applying for up to $50,000. Applicants that do not have an audit or a financial review can apply for a smaller grant. That means that you can apply For 10,000 to 25,000, please keep in mind that you cannot ask for less than 10,000. 10,000 is the minimum request for this funding opportunity. So again, the deadline is February 21st at 11:59 p.m. I can't overemphasize the importance of starting your proposal early. Please, please, please do not start your proposal on February 21st. That is a very high risk activity to start on the day of the deadline. People do it anyway, and it's a very stressful way to go. Please also keep in mind that fluid review can move slower when people are trying to submit their proposal at the same time. So know that there's always the chance that if you're working on the day of the deadline, you may hit the submit button and see that little time circle spin, which is nerve-wracking, because if 11:59 hits and your application hasn't moved forward, that means that it won't be evaluated by the panel. It just won't be counted. So what we do suggest is that you hit the submit button early. Alicia will discuss this in more detail, but do keep in mind that you should not fear the submit button. Let's say you hit the submit button on February 17th and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I totally forgot to upload my organization's strategic plan. You can still enter fluid review, upload that strategic plan, and you know, even though you hit the submit button, you can still alter your application as long as you do it before the deadline has passed. So don't fear the submit button. It's actually safest to hit it earlier instead of later. All right, in terms of eligibility, all organizations must have an Arts or Humanities focused mission. The organization must have a primary office or location in Montgomery County. All applicants must have annual cash operating expenses and income of at least $50,000. You have to demonstrate that you have 501c3 status, and all organizations must be governed by an independent, legally liable board of directors. Importantly, keep in mind that you must meet all of these eligibility requirements for at least the previous 3 consecutive fiscal years immediately prior to the application deadline. So that means that if you're an organization that just got your 501c3 status this year, you are not eligible. That means also if you're an organization where this year you finally have annual cash operating expenses and income, but you didn't have annual cash operating expenses and income of at least $50,000 last year, that means that you're not eligible. You have to meet these requirements for the previous 3 consecutive fiscal years immediately prior to the application deadline. And I emphasize this because we always get questions about this requirement. So do keep this in mind. All applicants must also have a minimum of 40% of board members residing and or working in Montgomery County. A minimum of 51% of your programs and services must take place in Montgomery County. And again, a friendly reminder that you must have at least 1 part-time paid employee working a minimum of 5 hours per week if you are requesting 25,000 or less. Again, if you're requesting over 25,000, we're going to need you to have a paid employee who works at least 20 hours per week. Again, more project eligibility facts here. Projects must contribute to the organization's fiscal stability and long-term viability. They can address long-term planning, planning for capital improvement projects or technological improvements that are critical to an organization's mission. Projects can ideally heighten the applicant's ability to provide services that directly benefit Montgomery County constituents. All projects should do that, so please make that clear in your application. And funded activities must take place between January 1st, 2020 through January 30th, 2021. So that means that we cannot pay for any pre-award costs. If you, for example, start, bills come in for your project in, June, we can't pay for those costs. And obviously, if you have costs that fall outside of the period of support past June 30th, we also cannot pay for those costs. So these are a few examples of eligible projects. This is not an exhaustive list, so if for some reason you have a project that you're thinking of that is not in direct alignment with what's listed on the slide, please contact staff and we'll talk to you about whether or not your project is eligible. But note that eligible projects can include board and staff training. By that we mean financial management, fundraising, marketing, communications. Eligible projects can include the creation of a long-term strategic or business plan. Projects can also include the implementation of organizational strategies to achieve enhanced DEIA. That means that, you know, you can apply to have a DEIA plan. You know, normally this is linked to a strategic plan, or it can be linked to a professional development request for board and staff. Eligible projects can also include the purchase of equipment or software intended to upgrade the organization's technological capacities. We can also fund studies and plans related to infrastructure needs. We can fund capital research, planning for major capital expenditures. Please keep in mind that this grant does not pay for those capital expenditures, but we can pay for the plan of major capital enhancements. So here's a list of non-allowable cash operating expenses. We cannot fund general operating expenses through this funding opportunity, investment fees, interest expenses. This doesn't cover re-granting. You cannot use this grant for capital costs, depreciation, bad debt, loan principal payments. This list is also available in our guidelines. We also cannot pay for investment revenues, unrealized gain or losses, in-kind donations, revenue raised for capital. And again, we can't use, grantees cannot use this grant to re-grant for other purposes. So do keep in mind that this is a project category that requires a match, and at least 50% of the match must be from donors who are new to the organization, or can be a gift increase from current donors. The match can come from any source. That includes revenues such as ticket sales, tuition, state and federal grants, but please keep in mind that your match cannot be a match from the county, and your match can also not consist of in-kind contributions. So a friendly reminder that this grant cannot cover general operating expenses, and importantly, it cannot cover the cost of staff for your organization. This is also a question that we get a lot. Most applicants that apply for an advancement grant already have a general operating support grant, and that's what you use general operating support for staff salaries. So advancement grants cannot be used for staff salaries. You can use advancement grants to pay a consultant, but you cannot use our grant funds to pay for staff. That's for your general operating support grant. You also cannot use our grant to purchase property, including land or actual buildings. Our funds cannot be used for the exclusive benefit of an organization's members. We can't pay for the cost of merchandise, and please do not include miscellaneous or contingency costs on your budget, because these are taxpayer funds. We need to know exactly where the money is going. So miscellaneous and contingency costs are not allowable. We also cannot fund the cost of receptions, debt retirement, scholarships, political advocacy, and none of our funding opportunities can pay for travel outside of the United States. So please keep in mind that proposals can only be for one project. So you want to design a proposal that's clear and concise. Please do not apply for funds for 50 different activities. It will confuse the panel if you have, you know, you want your whole board to go to a conference, and you also want to buy all new technology for your organization, and you also want to implement a DEIA strategic plan. That's too much. Ideally, your proposal will include one of the 3 activities that I mentioned. Please also keep in mind that if you received this grant for 2 consecutive years in a row, you have to sit out for 1 year. So that means that if you received this grant in FY19 and FY20, that means that you are not eligible for FY21. You would have to apply in FY22. And if you have any questions about this, please contact staff. Please also keep in mind that if you are applying for a capital grant through the county, a friendly reminder that the Arts and Humanities Council does not manage the capital grants moving forward. But if you are applying for a capital grant, that means that you cannot apply for an advancement grant. That rule has not changed. So you still have to pick one or the other. So here's the evaluative criteria. The evaluative criteria is extremely important because this is what the panel uses to evaluate the strength of your project. The evaluative criteria is in our guidelines beginning on page 7, and then it continues to page 8. You know, I can't overemphasize how important this criteria is, and it should clearly weave through your full application. Please keep in mind that the point system is not even. You'll notice that effectiveness of the project is the majority of the points. It's 50 points. All of the evaluative criteria is broken down in more detail within our guidelines. So again, please read the evaluative criteria carefully, read it more than once. For effectiveness of the project, this includes that the project is essential to the mission and the core work of the organization. The objectives are clearly stated and achievable. The project is an effective way to reach these objectives, and the applicant will achieve these objectives, and that these objectives will significantly enhance the organization's capacity to engage with the community. You know, and it also includes that the applicant clearly articulates how the completion of the project will benefit Montgomery County constituents. So I'm not going to read through all of the evaluative criteria in terms of the detailed breakdown that we have in our guidelines, because you can read it on your own in your guidelines, but I figured I should emphasize the first one because it's worth 50 points. If you have any questions about how we've defined the evaluative criteria, please do not hesitate to contact staff. So we do have some helpful resources on our website for how to implement DEIA within your organizations. You can find this in 2 locations. We have a resource page in the grants section of our website. We also have some helpful tools in our advocacy section. We have provided a couple of helpful tools that were actually developed by Americans for the Arts. Americans for the Arts is one of the largest advocacy organizations in the country. They do a hell of a lot of research. They're a wonderful resource for ideas for how you can enhance DEIA. And also keep an eye on our website because, as time goes on throughout the year, we will continue to add resources regarding diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. But if you're struggling with how your organization can enhance DEIA within your operations, also in terms of how you can go about diversifying staff and board, because remember, when it comes to DEIA, we want you to think internally and externally. That means diverse staff and board, but it also means diversifying audience and diversifying, the arts and humanities professionals that you work with that are presented to your community. We think the full bit is important. So check out these resources, and again, you can always contact staff if you have any questions about DEIA. So if you receive a grant, Payment will be made in full after we receive your financial report from the previous grant, if you received an advancement grant last year, the signed grant agreement, an ACH direct deposit form, a voided check, and importantly, we cannot pay you until we receive funds from Montgomery County government. So do keep in mind that sometimes the county will send us a late payment. So that's important in terms of your own financial management. We do say that you can bill us for any costs beginning on July 1st, but know that if we do not have funding in hand from the county yet directly on July 1st, that means that we cannot pay you directly on July 1st if we have not gotten our funding from the county. You can use our money as a reimbursement. So if you have costs starting on July 1st, but you don't have our funds in hand, you can definitely use our funds as a reimbursement when we are able to disperse funds to all of our grantees. And again, if you have any questions about this, just contact staff. So I'm going to quickly go over required application materials. So all applicants must submit a completed narrative of the project budget, upload organizational support materials, include match documentation, include financial support materials, programmatic materials, and you are all required to submit at least one work sample. You are also required to submit your IRS letter of determination if we do not already have it on file. Also submit a list of your board of directors with residency and work address included. Please don't forget to include key staff and volunteer bios as well. And remember that bios are a wonderful tool that can be used to show off how talented your staff is, how talented your volunteers are. So please make sure that their skill set is clearly emphasized within these bios. Include a strategic plan if your organization has a strategic plan. And it's also helpful to include an organizational chart if your organization has an organizational chart. So in terms of project support materials, the materials should assist reviewers in determining how you have designed and or planned your activity. So this can include reports from earlier phases of the project, consultant proposals, consultant CVs. You can also include information about how other organizations have approached similar activities. If you found an organization that has done work that's similar to yours, that you're modeling your project after. You can even include articles about best practices in the field for the type of activity you're engaged in. And you can also include training bulletins. Again, if you have any questions about project support materials for this category, let us know, because these materials are slightly different than, say, the materials you would provide if you're asking for funding for just programming. So feel free to contact us if you have any questions about this. So, you know, if you're an applicant that requests funds for equipment or technology, your project support materials must include a list of the items that will be purchased, a list of possible manufacturers or vendors, and the estimated cost of each item. For your match documentation, please include copies of letters thanking donors. You can include spreadsheets showing the match, and you can also include award notifications of other grants as proof of your match. You know, this isn't an exhaustive list, so if you have other forms of documentation that will serve as proof of a match, but you're not sure if these documents are eligible, feel free to contact staff and we can talk you through it. So in terms of financial support materials, you should include your FY19 audit or financial review. Again, this is dependent on how much money you're asking for. These documents must be received no later than June 1st. So, you know, if you're asking for over $50,000, but you can't give us an audit by June 1st, that means that your request will be deemed ineligible. These documents must be prepared by an independent certified public accountant. And if you're submitting an audit, you must include the auditor's report with the notes. You can also submit your FY19 990 or the letter of extension, and again, this must be received no later than June 1st. Please also include financial statements, your profit and loss and balance sheet for the most recently completed fiscal year. Submit your current fiscal year operating budget with actuals, your budget worksheet, and also documentation of pledges of financial support, and your projected FY21 budget if that is available. Also, you can submit programming support materials just to give the panel a general idea of the type of programmatic offerings you provide to the community. This can include newspaper reviews that highlight the success of your programs. It can include marketing materials such as programmatic booklets, flyers, brochures. You can include photos. Now for your work sample, we do have specific limitations. If you are submitting a video, no more than 2 videos, it must be a maximum of 5 minutes combined. Audio, we have the same requirements. Please keep in mind that if you do not have software or the capability to edit your audio or video, that's fine. Let's say you are submitting a hyperlink to YouTube or Vimeo. What you can do is provide the panel with directions. So let's say you have a phenomenal video and it's 20 minutes. You can tell the panel to fast forward and stop watching within a certain time frame. So you can upload a PDF that says, please watch beginning at 7 minutes within, and then stop after 10 minutes, so that the panel has a clear time frame to work with. If you're submitting images, you can submit no more than 15 images. Please upload those images in a PDF, and it's easiest for panelists if all the images are in one PDF. And for documents, you can submit a maximum of 10 pages, and again, it's easiest for panelists if this is all in one PDF. A friendly reminder that if your organization is a performing or media arts applicant, please submit video or audio. Photos are not very helpful for the panel. They can't really discern the quality of your work if you just submit a photo, unless you are a visual arts applicant. So Ana Alicia can discuss this in more detail, but there are various different acceptable file formats for fluid review. For documents, please only submit PDFs. Please don't upload Word documents. And if you have any questions about file formats, you can contact staff. And I am going to pass the baton over to my colleague, Ana Alicia, who will go over fluid review.
Good morning, everyone. Just touching on this slide a little bit more, I know that many of you will most likely be submitting some sort of Excel document with financials. Like the slide says, please try and use PDFs as much as possible. So try and export your Excel document to a PDF. If you have any questions about how to do that, then please feel free to reach out. And again, keep in mind, Excel, when it exports to a PDF, sometimes does a funny thing with the columns. So again, just please keep that in mind when you export to a PDF. So we're going to go through the Fluid Review application guide. Fluid Review is our online application portal. All materials must be submitted through this portal in order to be considered eligible. I hope that this will be a quick run through. I know some of you have been on this portal before, and for those of you who haven't, I hope that it's intuitive and easy to use. And if it's not, then I hope these slides help. And again, please feel free to reach out with any questions. We recommend using Google Chrome or Firefox for best performance, but Fluid Review will work on any browser that you have. This is what our home page looks like. The link for Fluid Review can be found in the guidelines on our website. So if you have any trouble accessing it, please let us know. If you have an account, then just sign in. If you need a new account, click the gray sign up button at the bottom right-hand corner. It will take you to a standard form. It asks for your name, your email, a password. It does ask for a phone number. Then please click the green Create Account button. You should receive a confirmation email with an activation link to activate your account. If you don't receive this email, again, please contact staff immediately so that we can fix this. And this is your account homepage. This is what you will see every single time that you log in. If you have applied to the Arts and Humanities Council through Fluid Review before, this is where you will see all your past grants. And so to start a new application, just click on the blue View Grants button on the bottom left-hand corner. This will take you to a page where you will see all of our open grant cycles. So scroll through until you find FY21 Advancement Grants and click the gray Create Submissions button all the way to the right to start your application. This is your application home page. You'll always see your name at the top and the grant category that you're applying for directly under it. And this home page basically shows you all of the tasks required to complete the application. So that includes the application narrative, all of the upload tasks for your financial information and your work samples. And on the right-hand side, under where it says progress, that's where it has another list of all the required application materials. So if you feel like you're finished, but you still see some tasks on that right-hand side, that means you still have some more work to do. We suggest that you start with the application narrative, which will always be the very first task. And to start any of these tasks, just click the blue Start button to the right. This is a screenshot of what the application narrative looks like. Please know that all required questions are marked with an asterisk. You're also free to navigate around the form with the blue page labels at the top. Right now they say general overview, evaluative criteria, project budget, and age CMC data. If you wish to work on your application in its entirety, if that's how you better process how to write your grant, then you're more than welcome to download a Word template of this application narrative, and that again will be found at the top. Just please keep in mind that that Word template is not a substitution for this Fluid Review narrative. All answers must be submitted on Fluid Review. So again, the Word template is for your own reference, but when the time comes, you must put in all your answers in Fluid Review. When you are writing your application, please be conscious of the character limit. When you start writing in the text boxes in Fluid Review, it will automatically tell you how many characters you've used and how many characters you have left, and it will actually not let you advance to the next page if you have gone over the character limit. And these character limits don't include spaces. So also, please keep in mind that this form does not auto-save. Please remember to save your work whenever you want to move on to the next page. A save button will be at the bottom of every single page in Fluid Review. Also, at this point in the application, please do not insert links into the narrative. So for example, if the question is about your organization's mission and you want to send them a link to go to your website, that is really not advisable. It's really to your advantage to explain in your own words what you want the panel to know. The panel kind of gets frustrated being sent all over the place, and you risk the panel not seeing exactly what you want them to see when you just put a link in the narrative. Please save all your links for your programming support materials and/or work samples. At the end of this form, there will be a project budget. There is a list of instructions at the very top. Please read them. It has everything you need to know about how to fill out this project budget form. Some things are more intuitive, like your project budget must be balanced, and some things are really specific for our own purposes. For example, you must asterisk any expenses that will be paid for by AHCMC. This is crucial for the panel to know how funds will be distributed, and this is crucial for us because we need to make sure that we're not paying for any unallowable costs. A reminder, this is taxpayer money, so we need to be extra careful. And then other things that are really pertinent to Fluid Review. So for example, please do not use the $ or commas in the amount column, because then Fluid Review will not be able to auto-calculate your total at the bottom. These are the project budget notes, which will be at the very bottom of that project budget form. Please do not neglect this section. This is a section that panelists pay attention to. And like the slide said, providing no explanation of your budget income will potentially lower your score. This is reporting data that the council needs. It will not have any impact on your evaluation. The panel will not see this. Please do your best to fill out this form. There's a box at the bottom for you to provide any explanation if necessary. And if you have any questions about how to fill this out, just please reach out to staff. Whenever you complete a task, the task will have a green complete button on the side, and at the very right it'll say view or edit. So it will allow you to view the task as a PDF. Just please know that you can always go back in and edit any of your answers as long as you remember to save your work. This is what the upload tasks look like. You will always have a set of instructions at the top relevant to the task that you're trying to complete. So for example, for work samples, it'll have that same list of what is required for video work samples and audio work samples. To the very right, you will see a list of supported file types. And then to upload any of your samples or any other documents, just click the blue Browse for Files button, select your file. The uploaded file will show up at the very bottom. And when you're done with this task, just click the Back to Submissions button to go back to your application homepage where all the tasks are. We recognize that many people may be working on this grant, so if you want more than one person in Fluid Review working on the narrative or uploading any tasks, you are more than welcome to create a team. On the right-hand side of your application homepage, you should see a gray button that says Add Members. It'll take you to a form where you fill out the person's name, email, their access level. If it says standard only, that means they have editing privileges. You can also set it to read only if that's what you prefer. And then just click Submit. And please fill out this form exactly as is, regardless of whether or not the person that you want to add already has a Fluid Review account. So when you feel that you are ready to submit your application, please know that the Submit Your Application button must be a vibrant blue for you to actually click it. If it's gray, that means that you haven't completed all the required tasks. Also, please know that if you do not hit this button, then your application is not registered as submitted, and unfortunately, staff cannot help you at this point when the deadline passes. So again, when you've completed all required tasks and you're ready to submit, please click this button. It will ask you to confirm that you're ready to submit, and it will also remind you that you may submit at any point before the deadline and still go back in and edit your application until the time of the deadline. So our best recommendation is to submit earlier, and then if you feel that you have something to add or you forgot to add something, then you can always go back in and edit, and at that point you wouldn't risk Fluid Review or your internet moving slowly at 11:58 on February 21st. Whenever you submit something on Fluid Review, you should always receive a confirmation email from Fluid Review. If you do not, then please contact staff immediately, because that means that it wasn't registered as submitted. And again, staff will not be able to help you if the deadline passes and we don't have an email that says that you submitted your application. We always recommend downloading your application for your own records. And again, that button will be found on the right-hand side of your application homepage. I will pass it back to Takenia.
All right, thank you, Annalicia. So I'm going to quickly go over some general tips for how to submit a strong proposal. We highly suggest that you read the project descriptions that we have on our website. We have project descriptions that cover projects that have been recently funded by the council. You can actually go back pretty far if you're curious to see the types of projects that have been historically funded under advancement. Even if you're a grantee who's received a grant, it's a smart thing to do. Please do not wait until the last minute to start your application. We can't overemphasize the importance of starting early. And if you start early, you'll have time to call staff with any questions that you may have prior to submitting the application. Please remember that on the day of the deadline, staff will work normal business hours, so we won't be available past 5:30. So if you come up with an urgent question at 10 o'clock at night, we can't help you out. So start early, come up with your questions early. Normally, the applicants who start their proposals early submit clearer proposals. Normally what happens is that when an applicant starts their proposal on the day of the deadline, it's a messy submittal, it's not clearly written. Don't take that risk. Don't risk sending a proposal to the panel that doesn't make clear sense because you were frazzled and rushed. Please read the instructions on fluid review very carefully. And also, please read the grant guidelines carefully while working on your projects. And I highly suggest reading the guidelines more than once. There's a lot to absorb. Write clearly and concisely. Make good use of the space provided in the application narrative. It's always good to have someone who's unfamiliar with your organization's work proofread your application for readability, for clarity, for content. I think it can be really hard when you're always absorbed in the day-to-day activities of your organization to not make assumptions about what's understandable within your proposal. That's why it's helpful to have someone who's totally outside of what you do read your proposal to make sure that it makes sense, because while our panel will have general knowledge of the arts and humanities sector, and they'll have some understanding of what's going on in Montgomery County, you can't assume that the panel knows your organization specifically. Please prepare your support materials well in advance of the deadline. You'd be surprised, but very often this can be the trickiest part of the application for the applicants that apply. So please, give yourself extra time for your work samples and support materials. And we highly encourage you to attend a panel meeting so that you can learn from the panel. If you have the time, it's good to listen to their assessment of other proposals as well, so you can learn about various different ways to approach project design and application submittals. And please feel free to call the grant staff to set up a feedback appointment if you're unable to attend the panel. Also know that you can still ask for a feedback appointment even if you did attend the panel, just to make sure you have a clear understanding of the panel's feedback. Again, applications must be submitted by Friday, February 21st at 11:59 p.m. This is a non-negotiable deadline. This also means that if you submit all your materials, your work samples, your supplementary materials through Fluid Review by the day of the deadline, and then let's say, on February 22nd, you realize that you forgot to upload something, please don't email it to us, don't mail it. We can't take any attachments past the day of the deadline. Everything has to be submitted through Fluid Review. And again, we will not submit applications that are late. There are no exceptions. We highly encourage you to sign up for our newsletters if you have not done so yet, so that you can be kept in the loop of all the various different activities that we offer for the community, so you can be kept in the loop about any guidelines or funding opportunity changes. So you can go to our website and sign up. And please do so if you haven't done so yet. And at this stage, I'm going to answer any questions that you may have. I see that we have a question here regarding matching funds. So for matching funds, what are the restrictions on dates those funds are received? So I'll say this, the latest date that you should receive your matching funds is when the final report is due. So matching funds have to be in-house by July 31st, 2021. If you do anticipate a problem with the receipt of your matching funds, meaning that you think that the funds will arrive past this date, but you're certain that they will arrive, please contact staff and find out if you need to submit a project change form and find out if you need to submit an extension request. Any changes that occur with your project require approval from staff before those changes can occur. We can't guarantee that all changes will be approved, but if you are running into a timing issue with the receipt of your match and you are certain that it'll come through, you know, it might be worth your while to submit a project change form for an extension. And again, you'll want to contact staff about how to go through that process. So I'm going to sit here for a couple of minutes more to see if there are any other questions. At this point, there's only been one question that's been submitted. I know that sometimes it takes individuals a minute to absorb all of the information that we threw at you. So if you're sitting there thinking, I want to give you a few minutes to absorb, and we're going to hold tight for a little while longer to answer any questions that anyone may have. Know that if you can't think of a question right now, but you come up with one later, we'll be happy to help you out. Okay, so you want us to share examples of financial support, for pledges of financial support. I actually might just go back to that slide. So give me 1 second while I scroll back. Did I pass that? Okay, sorry folks, bear with me. Also know that we'll send out these slides, and this webinar is being recorded. It will actually be placed on our website, so know that you don't have to have all this information memorized. We'll let you know when it's on our website, and then you can always watch it at your leisure whenever you want. If you have questions, particularly if it's outside of office hours when staff are not here. So excuse me, oh, here we go. So here are some examples of pledges of support that can be uploaded to Fluid Review. So copies of letters thanking donors for their support. You can upload a spreadsheet showing the match. Just keep in mind what Anna Alicia mentioned about allowable file format. So if it's an Excel document, please put that Excel document into a PDF. And if you're having problems with you know, with the way it looks in a PDF, you can contact us, but we need to make sure that all uploads are PDFs. But yes, you can include a spreadsheet showing the match or matches plural. And you can also include award notifications of other grants received. So if you've received a letter or some notification, that's clear proof that you have a grant coming through that'll be used as your match. You can upload those award notifications. And if you have another form of documentation that is not listed on the slide and you're not sure if that documentation will work, just give staff a call and we'll let you know if it's an appropriate form of documentation for the match requirement. So I'm going to hold tight for a moment to see if any other questions come through. Give it a couple of more minutes. We're going to scroll back to the questions page so that, you know, so, oops, there we go. Oh, yeah, well, yeah, it's good to have our contact info here. So again, you know, feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions, you know, call or email any of the staff listed here. Always remember that there are no stupid questions, and I mean that wholeheartedly. It is always better to ask instead of making assumptions. I'm going to hold tight for another minute to see if any other questions come through. Going once, going twice. Okay, at this point, folks, I think I'm actually going to close the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. We wish you the best of luck with your submittals and have a lovely weekend.